This is going to be my first time doing a Q&A video on this channel, so I'm curious to see how it ends up going. I hope you guys enjoy this. Thanks to all of you that went to Twitter and tweeted to me at SchlegDaddyTV these questions for this hashtag NFL Q&A. I can tell you right now there will be another Q&A coming up. I think it's going to be on Sunday. Yeah, Sunday. And it's going to be hashtag NBA. So the subject is anything and everything pertaining to the NBA, past, present, and future. So go to Twitter, tweet your questions using that hashtag NBA to at SchlegDaddyTV, and the best questions will make that next Q&A on Sunday. All right, let's get started here with this hashtag NFL Q&A. I was looking forward to this one. At Dylan Schwartz has two questions, both pertaining to the Cleveland Browns. I guess, hey. Why did the Browns do so well after losing Trent Richardson, and is Hoyer really that good? I'll start with the second question first. I don't know if Hoyer was really that good, but he obviously brought something different to the table to the Browns. He had a little bit of a pizzazz to him, I think. He had a little bit of that intangible that's hard to describe, but makes him at least an effective NFL starting quarterback. You know, going into the 2014 season, even with him coming off of the knee injury, he'll be at worst, he'll be the backup to a young first-round pick at quarterback. Best case scenario for Hoyer, at least, is that he's going to be the starter as a young guy, maybe a Johnny Manziel, waits in the wings for their opportunity. But Hoyer definitely showed something. He, at the worst, showed that he could be a middling to effective starter at the NFL or a great backup that anybody would love to have on their championship caliber team. Why did the Browns do so well after losing Richardson? Yeah, they won 3 in a row, and then they lost a couple. Then they just beat the Ravens this past Sunday. It might have been one of those things where, you had Hoyer take over. That was a big thing, and that helped. Maybe it was also the fact they rallied around the fact that Richardson was gone. They were a little upset as a team. Sometimes those type of things happen. The Browns aren't a horrible team. They're by far not anywhere near being the worst team in the NFL, that's for sure. I just thought before the season they were going to be a middle-of-the-road team, maybe win 7, maybe 8 games, and I still think that's going to be the case. At T-Von Moucher, when Jerry Jones retires, will the Cowboys go uphill or downhill? Retire, die, whatever you want to call it. The thing is with Jerry Jones, he needs to put his ego off to the side. Because I got in an argument with somebody at work who's a Cowboy fan. He was trying to shit on the Bears. And it's like, yeah, you won 3 Super Bowls in the 90s. And you also haven't been back to a Super Bowl since the 1995 season. And actually, the Bears have been in an NFC Championship game and Super Bowl more recently than the Cowboys. Jerry Jones is that organization's worst enemy. He needs to stop thinking he's a general manager when he is not and get real football people to make real football decisions, hire a real head coach, not a puppet like Jason Garrett, and maybe that organization can really, truly be America's team again. At Ruck Fools, do you think the new safety rules are eventually going to ruin the NFL's credibility? Look, I love old school football as much as anybody else, but I'm all for some of the changes they're making to try and make the game as safe as they possibly can, because you see these guys that are getting older, they have all these concussion problems, and then you got guys like Dave Dorson and Junior Seau committing suicide, and all these broken down athletes, and they get into their 50s, 60s, and 70s, have like no quality of life at all. I'm all for some of the safety changes. Yeah, it affects the quality of the physicality of the game a little bit, but ultimately I'm just watching it for the enjoyment of it. I'm not the one putting my body on the line and risking my future quality of life. So if the players are down with it, then I have no choice to be down with it, even if I miss some of the physical things that you used to see in the NFL that you don't get now. What are your thoughts on the Dolphins' handling of the Richie Incognito Jonathan Martin situation? Frankly, it's actually sounding like the coaching staff wanted Incognito to get harder on Martin to make him tougher. If that's the case, maybe the coaching staff, Philbin and the rest, need to be fired. This was horribly handled. They deserve all the shit they're getting right now. That's the way I'll put it. I could talk about it in a video throughout this month at some point in time in my fall ball series. We'll see. Who's more clutch, Eli or Peyton? Eli. Eli's got 2 rings. Peyton's got 1. End of discussion. At A. Sam Squanch, what must the Vikings do over the offseason to get back into the playoff picture, or even just a 500 record or better? They're going to have to let Jared Allen go. They're going to have to move on from Christian Ponder and Josh Freeman and Matt Castle. They're probably going to have to go get a real quarterback. They need to it's kind of funny because you thought they were already undergoing a rebuilding project. Well, it looks like they may need to fine tune and rehone that rebuilding project just a little bit. They definitely need a better quarterback. They could use a little bit better weaponry on the offensive side of the ball, and they could use some youth and athleticism on their defensive front seven. At Sam Stevenson 3, how far do you see the Panthers going this year? And also, have you heard anything about the tight end Eric Ebron out of North Carolina? I've watched him a little bit. I've been a little impressed. I haven't watched a ton of him yet. That'll come later when I start doing my scouting videos for the 2014 NFL Draft. As far as the Panthers, they're a team with a quarterback that can make some big plays. Their defense is playing very solid, and they have a great running game. And they have a wide receiver in Steve Smith who has a tendency to make some big plays in big games. This is a Panthers team that if they're focused and, Rivera continues on this recent trend of taking more chances and I think, frankly, being a better NFL head coach, this is a Panthers team that could make a little noise in the playoffs. You need to watch out for him a little bit. At Chris S. Krieger, whatever. Okay. Whatever. As a Bills fan, should I be encouraged or discouraged by a 3-6 start when we haven't had any embarrassing shellackings? I think you should be encouraged. I know you're 3-6. You haven't made the playoffs since the '99 season. The Nashville Nightmare, as Bills fans should call it, not the Music City Miracle, the Nashville Nightmare. It's kind of almost been like a curse over your organization. But you look at this organization. You took E.J. Manuel, who I think he needs to stay healthy. But he's shown some flashes of being a big-time NFL quarterback down the road. You have a nice running game with Jackson and Spiller. I think Robert Woods is going to fit nicely with Stevie Johnson over the next few years. At wide receiver, Kiko Alonso, you got in the second round. He's a stud. You have some other nice talent on the defense, Marcel Darius, Mario Williams. You got some nice pieces there in Buffalo. Sometimes it just takes time for it to gel together, but when it gels together, it can gel very nicely together. I like the leadership I've seen out of Doug Marrone. I think the Bills are definitely, even at 3-6, upticking in the right direction, and they could definitely be a playoff contender as soon as next season. So you should stay encouraged. Just hang in there another year. It might pay off for you. At RealZiggy23, Schleg Daddy, how do you feel about Tim Tebow's release from the Patriots? I really don't have a feeling about that one way or another. I don't care. That's the best way I could put it, brother. I mean, it's amazing how much media attention Tim Tebow gets. He was just another player, frankly, and he got cut because he wasn't good enough to make it at quarterback. That's just the way it is. At Total Heel, do you think the Saints have a chance of winning this year's Super Bowl? I don't want to say they don't have a chance. I just don't think they have a very big chance. I think reality will slowly catch up with them a little bit in the regular season. They'll still win like 10, 11 games, maybe win the division. But I don't really view them as a truly viable Super Bowl contender. I do not. Sorry. At XAnvil50X, do you think the Panthers are for real? A little bit, yes. I caution and hesitate to get too far behind them, because this is still a team at times I think lacks a little discipline and finds a way to lose games that they probably should win. But they've won a few games in a row. They've got a lot of the elements you need to make a deep run into the playoffs. So at this moment, they do look a little real, frankly. At JC Styles 876, do you think Terrell Pryor is the right quarterback for the Oakland Raiders? Yeah, I do. I think you've got your guy. He's still got some work to do. He's far from a polished player. He's far from perfect. But boy, Terrell Pryor does buy you the opportunity to not have to look at quarterback in next year's NFL draft, which is something before the season you might have assumed that the Raiders were going to be in the Teddy Bridgewater sweepstakes. That's not the case anymore. They don't need to look at that. That's not their top need as an organization for a position. Pryor's brought something to the Raiders. The Raiders have a little life. There's a little excitement there, something that hasn't been there for about a decade. And will the Oakland Raiders make it to the playoffs? This year, no. Could they next year? Never say never, but I'd probably point to 2015 more. I think they need another solid draft, maybe two, to get better talent on both sides of the football before they really can seriously think about making the playoffs, especially with, you look at that division and you have Peyton Manning's going to be there a couple more years. The Chiefs' defense is still really stout. And the Chargers are kind of middle of the road. So the Raiders have a little bit of a ways to go. At APizzle90, who in your opinion is the biggest asshole in the history of the NFL? Biggest asshole. See, asshole is kind of a double-edged thing because you can automatically perceive that to be negative, and sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. I think Bill Parcells was a big asshole, but that doesn't necessarily always mean it was a bad thing either, because sometimes some of the questions the media ask him would just be fucking stupid. Jeff George was a pretty big asshole. there are a lot of assholes. You know, you might say O.J. Simpson ended up being an asshole in his real life, but that was quite a few years after his football career was over. There were times where Al Davis was an asshole, or times where Pete Rozelle was an asshole. Roger Goodell is a pretty big asshole sometimes. So I don't know if I could point to just one. Mark Gastineau would be another example of a pretty big asshole. But again, I kind of like them guys like Gastineau sitting there doing all these sack dances when their team's down 20 points. Gives us something to talk about sometimes. At W. Rain Foster, what's the only way the Jaguars and the Browns can be competitive football teams in the NFL? The Jaguars are going to be undergoing a rebuilding project that's probably going to take a couple of years. They need to find their franchise quarterback and build everything else around that. I like what Gus Bradley's done down there. I don't think the Jaguars have quit on him. I think they've played hard for him. So I think he deserves some more time to implement what he wants to do and see where they go. The Browns, it's going to come down a lot, honestly, to that 2014 draft. That's what they're geared towards as an organization. That's what they're pinning all their hopes on. They have to hit it big in that 2014 draft. If they do, they could be a serious team in 2015 and 2016. If they flop in 2014, then they'll be the same old fucking Browns they have been since they came back into the league for the most part in '99. Should the Jags sign Tim Tebow? I don't see why not. I don't see what the fuck it would hurt. Blaine Gabbert sucks. I've told you for 3 years now he fucking sucks. If anybody doubts that, then they're a moron. He sucks. Chad Henne's not the long-term answer. What's the worst that could happen with Tebow? You start him a couple games at the end of the year, you sell some tickets, and you actually get people to come to a Jaguars game? What's the worst thing that happens? He flops out, flames out, and you're bringing in somebody else next year any damn ways? You know what I mean? At One and Only Tails asks, do you think the Pats can make a run at the Super Bowl? No. I don't. And the reason I don't is because I think they're the same type of Pats team that it's not as good as people perceive on defense and offensively, even though last year and again this year I think they have a better identity in the running game. There's just something that's a little bit of a miss, and I don't think they have the weapons that they once did. So no, I think they're a team that can maybe make it to the divisional round of the playoffs, maybe the AFC Championship, but I don't view them as a Super Bowl threat. Even, especially with some of the injuries that they've sustained. At TWE League Henry, after watching last night's football life, what are your thoughts of the Fog Bowl? Because you never hear the Bears' point of view on it. I actually remember watching the Fog Bowl. I was 7 years old. I watched it with my dad. It was the most surreal thing I've ever watched, whether it be television or in person. I watched that game with my dad on TV. I will never forget that game. Never, as long as I live. One of my favorite games ever to watch. One of the strangest games to ever watch. I'll put it this way. Did one team have an advantage over the other team? No, not really, because both teams had to play in conditions where they could barely freaking see. Eagles fans are sitting there for 25 years and bitching about the fact that they should have postponed the game, they should have stopped the game, but neither team could see. And the bottom line is that the Bears lost, they would have bitched about the same thing, but the Bears won, so they're not bitching about it. It becomes a memorable game, one of the greatest games with names of all time. That's my story too, and I'm sticking to it. My bigger disappointment with that '88 season was that the Bears kind of got steamrolled in that NFC Championship game by Joe Montana and Jerry Rice and the 49ers. It was below zero on Soldier Field, and they lost 28-3. One of the more painful losses I've ever had as a Bears fan, even at 7 years old. At Ilias99, how do you feel about the media belittling Nick Foles' 7-touchdown game, but still praising Peyton Manning? Look, you know what you get with Peyton Manning. The national sports media, no question about it, is going to do everything that they can to protect the Peyton Manning brand, because that's ultimately good for business. And if anybody thinks anything else, they're also fooling themselves. That's part of the reason why Peyton Manning doesn't get nearly the negative publicity for some of the things and some of the failures he's had over the years in big-time games, is because it's not good for business. You got to protect the brand. You got to protect the Peyton Manning brand. However, Nick Foles had a great game, but Peyton Manning also has a career of lots of great games. So, him having a 7-touchdown game is no real surprise, because you would expect that type of performance in the regular season, at least out of Peyton Manning, whereas it would be a big shock and feel more like a fluke out of a Nick Foles. We're talking about Nick Foles here. It'd be something different maybe if an Aaron Rodgers or a Drew Brees or Matt Ryan had this type of game. It was Nick Foles. It wasn't Peyton Manning. That's just the bottom line. Let's see here. What else we got? At MC_Big Bird. The most underrated quarterback of the last 15 years. Most underrated. I think Jeff Garcia was a little underrated in terms of how good he was, because he helped a couple of different teams get to the playoffs, 49ers, Eagles. I think he's underrated in terms of how good he was. Other underrated quarterbacks of the past 15 years. I think sometimes Donovan McNabb gets a bit of a raw deal. He didn't always have the best talent around him on the offensive side of the ball in Philadelphia, yet they made 5 NFC championship games and a Super Bowl appearance during this time. I think Philly fans, I think NFL fans, Eagles fans, they underestimate just how good Donovan McNabb was and just how important he was. And, frankly, another guy I think that is a little bit underrated, and he was for a number of years, was Tom Brady. And the reason I say that is, yeah, he was winning the Super Bowls, but people assumed it was because of the defense and he was a system quarterback. But wasn't it amazing once he got weapons similar to Peyton Manning, he started putting up numbers equivalent or better to Peyton Manning. So I think for the first few years of his career, people kind of slept on Tom Brady and how talented and good of a starting quarterback he was. Those are just a few of the names that stand out. I'm sure I'm missing some guys too, and that's fine. Those are just a couple of guys that kind of stand out to me a little bit. At Joe Zwaba, what's your opinion on the possibility of having a London franchise? Even as a Britain fan, I'm ambivalent towards it. I think it's a dumbass idea. I mean, what player is going to want to sign a contract in free agency to want to go over there? How many players that got drafted by a London franchise are going to try and hold out and demand a trade? There's just so many logistical problems of every team that goes over there might have to have a bye week afterwards, or you have to schedule it where the team that plays in London has 2 or 3 home games in a row, then 2 or 3 road games in a row. I'm okay with playing a couple NFL games over there. I'm okay with maybe having a Super Bowl over there in a few years, but having a full-time NFL franchise over there, no, that's just dumb. I think that's Goodell overreaching. I think it's just Goodell being a moron, which wouldn't be the first time he's been a moron. It's like, it's one thing when you have it as a special attraction a couple of times a year. The people in London may show up just because, again, it is a special attraction. But if you're going to move like the Jaguars there, why would they want to go watch a shitty organization, a shitty football team? And having 8 regular season games over there, I think the novelty of it will wear off pretty quickly, and then you would have a problem a couple of years later. I mean, mark my words, they would have trouble drawing people to the event. That's just the way it is. I mean, you're trying to go into an area where soccer is king and always will be king, and you're trying to carve out market share. It's just a very, very uphill battle. It's almost impossible to do, so why bother? Why bother? I mean, you could say, yeah, Canada, hockey is king, but they have their own thing. Well, yeah, but they play an entirely different style of football up in Canada, and that's been there for a good number of years, and that had its own infrastructure and organization and everything else, and it still had the American talent to feed off of. Going to Canada wasn't as bad as going, 6-7 hours time difference over to damn London, England. No, I'm not a fan of it, and I think it's Goodell being greedy and being stupid, and I don't even think it's really necessarily that good for business. So thanks for all of you that submitted your questions for this hashtag NFL Q&A. Remember, Sunday, the next Q&A in this fall ball series, this Schleg Daddy TV month-long extravaganza, will be all about the NBA. So go to Twitter, tweet your hashtag NBA questions to @SchlegDaddyTV. Thanks again for submitting your questions for this one. I hope you've enjoyed.